What's Iowa's best game plan for knocking off Iowa State at Kinnick Stadium on Saturday? We explore what it's going to take to beat the Cyclones. The non-conference basketball schedule has been released, and it is an ugly one at Carver Hawkeye Arena coming up this winter. Plus, John Bohnenkamp joins us all today. Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we start as we break things down, and it's now time to get a little bit deeper into the game. What we expect to see at Kinnick Stadium coming up on Saturday, 2:30 kickoff on CBS. The first game at Kinnick Stadium that'll be broadcast on CBS since 1985. And then, of course, the number 1 versus number 2 matchup with Iowa beating Michigan 12-10 in that one. This will not have those kind of stakes. This one's still pretty big, though. Iowa with an opportunity to jump out to a nice start to the season, not give one back. And as we mentioned yesterday, everydayers, you'll remember this. This is a group of Iowa Hawkeye players that haven't beat Iowa State in Kinnick Stadium for the most part. Outside of the veterans, the 5th and 6th year guys, you have to go back to 2018, the last time Iowa beat Iowa State inside of Kinnick Stadium. Of course, that has not been the case of Jack Trice, as they've had a lot of success there. No game in 2020, and then 2022, the disaster. Fullback fumble. It was just one of those days on a rain-drenched afternoon at Kinnick Stadium. This looks a lot better. The weather looks to be picture perfect. Couldn't ask for better. It's approaching 70 degrees, clear skies, a beautiful day for football, a beautiful day for tailgating. Also going to be over in Iowa City. I'm going to be part of the pre-game show with 600 WMT over in Cedar Rapids. Excited for that one. As you're getting ready for the game, pop that one on. I'll be part of the Hawkeye Bumper Brigade, getting things started before the Learfield Network takes over with Gary Dolphin and newly minted color commentator Pat Angerer. So that'll be taken up starting at 11:30 as when we'll get started with that one on Saturday morning. That aside, let's get into the game and the matchup here with Iowa State and Iowa. There's a few things and a few elements that continue to excite me about this team. Yes, we've talked about the second half and how good it looked, and Cade McNamara really seeming like he found his footing throughout the course of that game, late in the first half and into the second half, and just how well that he played. You also have Tim Lester. And, watching now the game for the third time, and yes, I'm sick, but was watching it for a third time here this evening. And one thing that really jumped out to me is you see the in-game adjustments, right? The little things that they were doing, the plays that we hadn't seen before, the route concepts. And it's something that, yes, I've been complaining about for years. I've complained about the route concepts that Iowa's been running for the better part of a decade, but because it just didn't make sense, both in the Greg Davis era and the Brian Ferentz era. What they were trying to do in the ground game, it just didn't marry with what Iowa is doing in the passing game. And now you see route concepts that make sense. You understand what Tim Lester is trying to do, and you can see schematically that this team has taken a big step forward. And I think what you're going to see in this one, it was a very vanilla game plan, pretty boring overall what they did in the game against Illinois State. I think you're going to see a lot more elements. I mean, you go back to the first half and you look at the runs that Kamari Moulton was able to get. There just wasn't a whole lot there because they weren't doing a whole lot. I think you're going to see even more jet sweep motion coming up this week. Could be Caleb Weegen, getting him involved in that. Caleb Brown's going to be back. Could that be a possibility? More swings, more screen passes and the like. I think you're going to see a much more diversified game plan from Iowa coming up this weekend. Speaking of that motion, last year, Iowa famously lasted a lot of categories in college football offensively, including in just using motion. Just 25.5% of snaps a year ago used motion. Last week, it was up to 52.1%. And I think that number is going to go north coming up this week. You're going up against an Iowa State team that is incredibly banged up in the linebacker spot. Their best linebacker, Caleb Bacon, is out for this game and out for the foreseeable future. Not only that, but their depth has already been impacted. A freshman that played a year ago, Willich, he's out for the season. He tore his ACL back in spring. Some of their other young guys have been banged up. McLaughlin didn't play a week ago. So they are really light at the linebacker spot. And I have a feeling John Haycock, their fine defensive coordinator, is going to come up with something a little bit different, a game plan, a scheme that's going to look different. One thing over in Iowa State they've been talking about a lot during the summertime that's come up is them using more four-man fronts. Now, it didn't happen a week ago. They didn't use it a whole lot against North Dakota. I do wonder this week. They're pretty deep and as deep as they've ever been at defensive line, if that's a way that they go when you're looking at kind of more of a 4-2 kind of look out of them defensively. But that aside, that's from the Iowa State perspective. Back to the Iowa perspective and what we're going to see. More motion. I think that's going to continue. You're going to see those kind of things. And there was also elements of the game that Iowa obviously was able to exploit at different times, but I think is going to open up. You go back and you look at that RPO play that Jacob Gill, no, check that. I believe it was Vanderzee actually caught the ball on that one. Beautifully designed play. They came out in the second half, and you saw right after that play, Iowa picked up a big gain on the ground because they've been crashing down and just it keeps them back a little bit. Iowa State's going to be aggressive. Iowa State is normally aggressive, but if you can get those RPO elements into the game, I think it's going to go a long way for Iowa, not just winning this game, but possibly getting out to a comfortable lead and doing those kind of things. Another thing that I love to see as I was watching the game is just the way that the pocket was moving. We talk about the route concepts and the way that they all connect, seeing what they're trying to do, moving eyes with the motion, all those different things. But the pocket moving horizontally, moving in and out, side to side, doing different things with the pocket as well. I think that was very helpful for Cade McNamara as he was working his way back. I think you can see him get more comfortable with that. That's something that is good for Iowa, not just a sitting duck back there in the pocket, but you move that pocket around a little bit and you change things up that way. It can change, obviously, what the defense is seeing and the ability for Cade McNamara to tuck it and run. And he can do that. Yes, he's not Michael Vick, but he's also not Spencer Petras. And there's a lot more athleticism to him. And a guy that, if he needs to pick up a first down with his feet, he has that kind of ability. I really liked what we saw on that aspect. And one other thing that took away, and I think this is going to be a big part of the game. I believe that if I was Iowa State, I'd be going another direction. Look, they've tried to out Iowa in the last 7 meetings under Matt Campbell, and it worked out once. The last game at Kinnick Stadium back in 2022, the 10-7 victory. Outside of that, however, this thing hasn't worked for them. Now, yes, there's been some bounces that have gone Iowa's way. Iowa's made some plays and ultimately won these football games outside of that one, but they're trying to play Iowa football. And that's the way they're built. I mean, that's the way that they play, but their advantages are at the wide receiver position. They have a fine young quarterback in Rocco Beck, continue to see his maturation. And you saw from what he was in game 2 a year ago in game 3 to what he turned into a season ago. I'd be slinging it around. That's what I'd be doing. Take the Northwestern offense of the mid 2000s through 2015, dunk, drop-off passes. I wouldn't worry about the run game because with their offensive line also banged up, much like their linebacker core, I don't believe they're going to be able to run the football against Iowa. Instead of worrying about the run game, no. Go to what is your strength, and that is those wide receivers. Ben Brahmer is a good tight end, and I think that is the way to do it. If I was going to do it, it's forcing turnovers. And if it does turn into that game, we saw it early in the game last week. Jabari Harris saw the couple of plays that were going right at him, given that soft zone, and then jumped the route and got the interception. That's going to give Iowa an ability, and I think you're going to see that aggressiveness start to pick up if we do see Iowa State come up with that kind of game plan. It's a working theory that I had throughout the course of the spring and summer. What we've seen the last 2 years, you saw the turnovers that are forced by the Iowa defense the last couple of years. They've really dissipated. They've gone back from what they were in some of the highest levels that we saw in forcing turnovers. Well, you saw Sebastian Castro come up, trying to punch that ball out. Harris jumping a route. With Iowa's offense, if they make the improvements this year, Teams are not just going to be able to rely, well, we're going to punt it back to them because we don't think that offense can do anything. If the offense is just okay, teams are going to have to be more aggressive against this Iowa defense. And you know what that means? Turnovers. That's good for the Hawkeyes. We got more football talk coming up for you. John Bohnenkamp from the Associated Press is going to join us. We'll talk a little bit to John about what he is expecting to see on Saturday. Also talk a little basketball with him as the non-conference schedule was released yesterday. We'll get into that with John Bohnenkamp. We continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, we talk a lot about FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season game, Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Of course, the big one this week for us, Iowa State. Hawkeyes currently a 2.5-point favorite, though. That number is starting to move in the market. In fact, as we record right now, Iowa still favored by 2.5 at FanDuel. The juice, though, heavily juiced up to -118 now. That is normally where you're going to see that thing flip over a half point and move to the Hawkeyes being a 3-point underdog. Looking at some of the betting splits out there, the money basically even slightly swayed towards Iowa. Same in terms of the ticket count, but not overwhelming here. I saw this happen at a lot of sports books over the last couple of hours. If we did see maybe one of those betting syndicates come in and bet on the Hawkeyes. You can bet on whatever you would like, it feels like, at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. NFL Week 1 coming up this weekend, and we got you covered with FanDuel. And make sure you check out NFL Sunday Ticket and that 3-week plan that you get with FanDuel. Join FanDuel.com and visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook.
John Bohnenkamp covers Iowa for the Associated Press, HawkeyeNation.com, et cetera, and John joins us to preview Cy-Hawk from their perspective. You heard the press conferences yesterday, John Bohnenkamp. First of all, good to speak with you as always.
Oh, as always.
So a takeaway or two from you. Obviously, it had to be different for Ferentz. I love the fact that he was asked, what was Saturday like? Had to be like nothing he has experienced in decades, quite frankly, of his coaching career. But is there maybe a takeaway or two from you listening to Coach Ferentz before we dive into it a little more in depth?
When he was talking about that, I was trying to imagine what that would have been like for him. Because I don't know how you process that when all you've done for the last however many years is coach a football game on Saturday, your team on a Saturday, and now you're watching them on TV. It had to be really weird for him. So it was fascinating to try to. But the takeaways are, I think they were really happy with what happened last Saturday. I think they liked what they got out of the offense last Saturday. They really liked what they got out of the defense. Now you've got a bigger game. It was very tame over there yesterday. Everybody was saying all the right things. Hey, this is a big game, whatever. But they're all big games, and that's not true. So, it was pretty tame. I think they're pretty focused on this game, and they know this is a big early test for them to kind of see where they're at right now on both sides of the ball.
It's a big step up in competition going up against this Iowa State team, talented up front, defense. Haycock always brings one, and they can chuck the ball up and around the yard. With that, game plan schematically wise, what you saw from Tim Lester's offense, and is it something that's sustainable? Of what we saw, and certainly during the second half of the game, a sign of things to come, or hey, that was a tired Illinois State team, doesn't have the same scholarship numbers as Iowa. They just wore them down on a hot afternoon. Your takeaway from the second half and the offense as a whole?
Well, they executed. And Kirk Ferentz said that last week, in talking about, when everybody's at, well, what's the scheme going to be like? What are you going to do here? And he's like, it doesn't really matter. We have to execute. And they executed. They blocked well. They didn't block very well in the first quarter or in the first half. But the offensive line was much better second half. And again, some of that is just wearing down an opponent. but they ran the ball well. I mean, Cade McNamara was really good. And I mean, I know you can say, well, it's an FCS team, but he put passes right on the money. It wasn't just, against a defense that was struggling. He threw good passes on Saturday in that second half. So if you put all that together, I mean, it's just simple execution, block and make plays, and that's what they did. And I think from that aspect, you can see that this offense was really in kind of a groove when that game was over with.
Thinking back to the month of August, and I know you didn't get Cade McNamara every week, anything like that. Right. I think you might have had him once or twice, but then leading up to the game against Illinois State, but where I'm going to go afterwards, because he had to be relieved, like Hawkeye Nation, quite frankly, probably the same way, because they hadn't seen much of their quarterback, certainly when he was been healthy. And they wanted to know, is Cade McNamara the guy? Maybe Sullivan, because we kept hearing that last week after you saw the kids' day practice. Did you sense relief from McNamara after he went out and things turned out the way that they did last week?
Yeah, and I mean, he had said before the game that he was 100% healthy. We had to see that. We had to see that as from a media perspective, from a fan perspective. The people watching outside and on TV, they had to see that. He struggled a little bit, in the first few possessions, and everybody, of course, was freaking out on social media. And it was funny how that all kind of shut up
very quickly. Yeah.
And nobody ever said, "Oh, hey, well, maybe we were wrong." It's just everybody, moved some other direction there. But I mean, he threw good. Again, like I said, he threw good passes. I mean, that the touchdown pass to Jacob Gill, I don't know how you throw that any better.
Right.
And I mean, it's double coverage, and he had good position, and there was only one place to throw that ball, and it was perfect. And he said yesterday that he woke up, he was sore from being hit, but that's the only thing that he was feeling sore about. It wasn't a sore knee, it wasn't a sore quad, and he said, he came out of it feeling very good. And so when he's healthy, I think you saw the other day what he is capable of doing and why Iowa wanted him a year ago and broke, made contact before he was in the portal, that sort of thing. But you see why they wanted him.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was the playmaker we saw at Michigan at least for a half. And certainly he looked quicker than I anticipated coming off that ACL tear. Little athleticism. Look, he's not Randall Cunningham back there, but he can move and he can make some plays with his feet. And that's another competent part of this offense suddenly that is all coming together. How does Caleb Brown and Caleb Johnson, the Calebs, how do they fit in this week after the second half after the suspension by Johnson, and then Caleb Brown coming back into the mix of wide receiver? What do you expect out of those two Saturday?
I think we'll see a lot of Caleb Johnson. I just think he's that good, and he has served his penalty now, and I think we see a lot of him. And as for Caleb Brown, I do think we see him a little bit. But right now, I mean, some guys have kind of established themselves as receivers. And so, where does he kind of fit in? I'm not sure yet. We'll find out on Saturday. But you've got some guys that the other day established themselves a little bit. And Seth Anderson the same way, whenever he comes back from whatever his injury is, where does he fit in with this group? So I think maybe the wide receiver room is a little better than maybe we thought it was. And I think you saw that on Saturday. So it's just a matter of where those guys kind of fit in. But I think Caleb Johnson gets a lot of carries on Saturday. And I think, you saw in the second half the other day what he could do.
I'm with you. I thought Gill, I don't remember him at Northwestern. I don't.
Yeah.
But Reese Vanderson, I'd never seen Reese Vandersee play. And I love the fact that he's 6'4" and he's a big target. And I wish there was more height on the roster. Bowie wasn't out of place. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because obviously Caleb Brown's got talent. Nobody's not saying that he's not good enough to play.
Right.
But there's guys ahead of him now. And look, I think that through the air, I think Iowa could have a very big day. I do, John. I think the tight ends, particularly Lachey, Iowa State is so banged up at linebacker. I think that could be the difference in this football game.
Yeah, and you saw the tight ends get some work on Saturday,
yep.
But you could tell that playbook was pretty short the other day. Now you're going to kind of open it up a little bit, and you're going to use those guys because you know what you have in them, you know what they can do, and so I just think you're going to see a little bit more of this offense than what we saw on Saturday. You're going to see a little more creativity. You're going to see a lot more motion. I think, like I said, I think they played that game pretty straightforward. Second half, they made some adjustments, did a few things here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty straightforward. I think maybe you see some more motion, some more things like that on Saturday.
Iowa State, what concerns you most from a Hawkeye perspective when you look at the matchup against ISU? What are some things that I was going to have to shore up on Saturday in your mind?
It's just, I don't want to say a weird defense. It's a different defense in what they're used to seeing. So how do they handle it? How does that front line handle what Iowa State can throw at them? I mean, they didn't handle in the first half some of the blitzing and some of the things Illinois State did. You know that's on tape now. You know Iowa State's thing. That to me is going to be the biggest thing, is how they handle that defense and all that. I think defensively on Iowa's defense, Iowa's defense versus Iowa State's offense, I think the Hawkeyes are pretty solid there, and I think it's going to be tough. I think for Iowa State to do some of the things that they like to do, because I just think Iowa right now is just so good from front to back. You saw really good play out of the secondary from Iowa there. So I think that it's going to be kind of hard maybe for them to move the ball, and if that's the case, then I think this is an Iowa win.
Yeah, not crazy. I thought the same way. I just can't get over, John. I mean, how many times Illinois State's training staff was on the field this past Saturday? That was a fight, and they finished second a lot of those times. They really did, because wow, I don't know if it was Iowa just that much more physical. Now they'll get tested, because I think Rocco Beck's a really good quarterback, but right. I'm not sure they have a running game. Iowa State, I'm talking about. They've got great receivers, but if they don't get time to throw the football, if they can't establish the run, if the Hawks know that they have to throw the ball, this plays right into Iowa's hand. We'll see. We'll see.
Again, with Iowa's defense, same what I said. The offense, I don't think you saw everything the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're going to see a few more things there. And Phil Parker figured out. He always does. Even with one arm, he still figures it out. So.
Was there at any point when you guys were watching Riley Moss and you're thinking, you know what, there's a guy who's going to be a starting corner in the NFL, because that's what he is. He's won the starting cornerback job opposite Pat Surtain. And if you think that Moss might be a little bit busy in the first few weeks, I mean, what a story. You covered him, John Bohnenkamp. And here he is. He's hurt, never got his opportunity last year, but he's starting for the Broncos in that secondary. How about that?
Hardworking kid. I go back to when he was a freshman and got picked on a lot by opposing quarterbacks.
Purdue in particular, right?
Oh God, yeah, that day was just terrible. And then you saw where he grew as a player, and so where he's at right now. I mean, that's just. And again, these are the guys that Kirk Ferentz puts in the NFL. These are hardworking guys that know how to figure things out. And you could see that if he's starting, he's figured things out in the NFL, and that's a pretty big step for a football player. So
we know you'll be in Carver coming up this winter. Which one of these excites you the most? Texas A&M Commerce, Southern, South Dakota, Rider.
Rider?
No, South Dakota. You know how I am. I'm a Summit League aficionado.
You are,
even though I don't cover the Summit, I'm still a Summit League aficionado.
So it's the Coyotes. Well, to finish the non-conference home schedule, New Orleans, New Hampshire, and South Carolina upstate. Mm-hmm. Outside of the Cyhawk game, that's what the home fans will be delivered up while they play games in Moline, Kansas City, and Sioux Falls. But that's attendance, right? I'm sure they get a better guarantee going out and playing these neutral card games compared to the people that show up in Carver now.
Yeah, and again, the NCAA Tournament Committee is going to see a home game against the top 10 team and 3 neutral court games, and neutral court is a metric they use. I've been seeing people complain about this on Twitter, and I wanted to say to them, go out and find me a Power 4 team that plays a lot of home and homes right now.
Yeah.
You don't see it. And I know Illinois has got a lot of games on their schedule. If you look at them, they're all on neutral court somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that's the wave of the future right now in college basketball is all these matchups, but they're somewhere else. And, Iowa State's going to be there. And I wish there were other ones, but then you also get 10 Big Ten home games against some really good teams. So it is what it is. And it's not something unusual for them. And look at Iowa State's schedule. And but people go to Hilton, So again, I'm looking forward to this season. I want to see what these guys do. I think this is an NCAA tournament team, and I think a lot of things are going to go right for them. I think it's a good group.
John Bohnenkamp, Associated Press, Hawkeye Nation, et cetera, et cetera. He joins us every couple of weeks. John, we didn't get to your Dodgers. We'll do that at some point. Yeah, they'll be fine. We'll talk soon, John. Thank you, buddy.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, we're done here.
We're done here.
See you later. To steal his line. He's a good dude, John Bohnenkamp. All right, so we'll take it.
John Bohnenkamp joining us. Appreciate John, as always, talking a little Iowa football with us as we get ready for Cy-Hawk Week. And some basketball. A little deeper thought in that basketball non-conference schedule that'll be delivered up. And did Iowa find a little bit of a loophole here as it pertains to that? John Bohnenkamp believes that Iowa is going to be a team in the NCAA tournament this season. It's hard to disagree, certainly from my vantage point. Also want to let you know, college football season with its back, it's not too late to catch up on everything happening inside the Big Ten. Locked On Big Ten has you covered with Craig Sheeman. Not only that, we have Locked On College Football. Find out who you believe and who our hosts believe are going to be teams in the college football playoff. What is happening with the new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Some thoughts on that non-conference schedule as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a small business owner, I know how difficult it can be to find those right people for the role inside your company. LinkedIn has something set up to help figure this out, a ton of different options to help you as a small business owner. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses, you're wearing so many different hats, you might not have the time or the resources to make that hire. And LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that's going to help you rate job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Once again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Pumped up for Saturday. Excited to get back over in looking forward to what should be a fun afternoon. I believe we'll make our official prediction tomorrow on the show and give you our perspective of how things are going to play out. We talked a lot today about the game plan for Iowa football, what they're going to do, what I believe they should do in order to pull off the victory. And we'll dive a little bit deeper more into that. Mentioned earlier FanDuel and the number that has been bouncing around a whole bunch of different places, up to 3, a couple of places. I saw it, so one of the sharper books, circa 51% at last check of the money and 57% of the bets were on Iowa. That is not a big public sway that you see a lot of times where you kind of want to go the other direction. In the gambling parlance, it's called reverse line movement. Something we don't have certainly in this spot. Mentioned the non-conference basketball schedule. We'll wrap up with that. Not exactly the who's who coming to Carver coming up this winter outside of the matchup against Iowa State. Game 1 after the exhibition against Minnesota Duluth, it'll be Texas A&M Commerce. They'll be coming in. Their net last year was 333rd in the country. Southern will be the next team that'll be making their way to Carver. 257 their net. Back to South Dakota. The Coyotes played them in the NIT a few years ago. They've been a decent program in the Horizon League. Not last season. They were 322nd in the country. Rider 220. Out of these bye games, that's the high water mark. South Carolina Upstate 303. New Orleans 340. New Hampshire 230. And of course the Iowa State matchup. They were 6th last year in the net. So that's a pretty good one there. But the angle that I'm wondering about here. So well before it became really an outcry for a lot of people, including a lot of ACC coaches a year ago, you take on these bye games, you take on the worst of the worst, and you drill them, it helps you out of the NCAA net. the ranking system that they use and what they moved on from the old RPI system. It was a welcome change. It was something that needed to happen. And though victory margin is capped at 10, the analytic numbers are not capped. And because of that, you go out there and beat a terrible team by 50, it's going to help you. And Iowa's done that. And they've done that incredibly well, not just beating these teams, but throttling them. That impacts your NCAA net, and they've done a good job. And a lot of other teams started to pick up on that and picked it up. Now I wonder about this new angle. Now, I was not playing in an exempt tournament this year. Disappointing because you normally at least get a couple, if not 3 good games that come out of those exempt tournaments. But they're playing the 3 neutral court games against Washington State, an NCAA tournament team from a year ago, made the round of 32 as they knocked out Drake in the first round. Their their net was 44 last season. Utah State, another team that was a tournament team, take them on in Kansas City. 38 is the net there. And then the matchup against Utah in Sioux Falls, a net of 48. They were a bubble team throughout the course of the year. If those teams are at least comparable to what they were a year ago, and you can win at minimum 2 out of those 3, I think it's going to go a long way of building up that resume. I think this Iowa basketball team is going to be good. I think they're going to be one of the surprises of the Big Ten this season. I think they're going to be undervalued, probably disregarded. I don't think they can win a Big Ten championship. Even finish in the top 5 in this new league of 18 teams is going to be incredibly difficult. But top 7, 8, I think that's a good range for this Iowa team. I think they're going to take a big step forward here this season. Thanks for being with us. This is Locked On Hawkeyes with you each and every day. If you're with us still, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or you can also jump aboard on the audio side. 5-star reviews if you're on Apple or any other Spotify, whatever podcast you're listening through. Make sure you hit us up with a good review there. Greatly appreciate it. Most importantly, helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans as you work through all the bells and whistles and all the analytics and however all that stuff works. Well, certainly well over my head. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football and the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search any further. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got you covered on the Hawkeye front. One more day to go before game day. Looking forward to it. Iowa State. It's hate week. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.